I
I
wasn't
can't
supposed to
believe
be
we
there
actually
that long.
painted the whole
Just a
living
quick
room.
favor.
I'm really
Carry an
sorry.
old box of
I
books
know, it
from the
looks
trunk
so
of her
much
car
better
up
now.
3 flights of narrow stairs. That was all. But the thing about helping someone is it never really stops at one trip. Elena lived 2 doors down. We'd nodded at each other before, in the polite way neighbors do when they're half awake and carrying groceries. I knew she worked late. Sometimes I'd hear her heels on the hallway tile around midnight, a soft click that seemed too precise for this shabby building. That afternoon the rain hadn't really decided what it wanted to be. Drizzle, mist, something in between. And her hair was damp at the ends, curling in uneven places. She handed me the first box like she'd done it 1,000 times. Calm, sure, a little amused at my fumbling grip. Careful, she said, not condescending, more like a quiet warning. I carried the box up while she locked the car, trying not to glance at the spines pressed against my chest. Heavy stuff. Architecture, travel, a novel with a cracked leather cover that smelled like rain on paper. Inside her apartment, the air was warm and faintly citrus, like a candle had been blown out not long ago. It wasn't messy, but lived in. Papers on the table, a sweater tossed over a chair. She told me to leave the box near the bookshelf and I almost did, but she was already opening another one, crouched on the floor, pushing damp hair behind her ear with a distracted swipe. You read all these? I asked, mostly to fill the quiet. Some twice, she said, not looking up, then after a pause. Some I bought hoping I'd have the time. There was a tired honesty in the way she said it. Not bitter, more like she'd learned to let certain disappointments sit quietly beside her. We carried the rest up in 2 more trips. The third trip was slower, not because the boxes were heavy but because neither of us really hurried anymore. The rain had turned steady by then, dripping from the edge of her coat onto the cardboard, leaving dark circles that spread like soft bruises. In the doorway she brushed past me, close enough that her sleeve grazed my wrist. I don't think she noticed, or maybe she did and just didn't say anything. When we'd finished, she handed me a glass of water like I'd done something heroic. Thanks, Noah, she said, my name quiet but solid, like it had weight in her mouth. I shrugged. Not a big deal. She studied me for a second, not staring, just letting her eyes rest on me a fraction longer than necessary. Then she smiled, a half thing, as if she just remembered she wasn't alone. You don't have to pretend, she said softly, almost playful but not quite. You wanted to help. The way she said it, low like a shared secret, landed somewhere I couldn't name. And then she stepped back, the moment already closing, like a door easing shut before you know you've walked through it. I left with rain in my hair and her voice in my head, looping for no reason at all. That night, I kept replaying her voice in my head, like I missed something, or maybe wanted something. The next time we spoke, it wasn't planned either. I'd just come back from a gig that didn't pay enough to justify how late it kept me out. My guitar case still slung over my shoulder, my shirt damp with city heat and late summer rain. I saw her door propped open with a folded piece of cardboard. A smell of paint, sharp but faint, leaking into the hallway. She was standing on a chair, one foot tucked awkwardly against the leg for balance, trying to tape a plastic sheet over the window frame. Elena, I said, half question, half instinct. She looked over her shoulder, strands of hair falling across her cheek, a smudge of white primer near her wrist. Temporary fix, she murmured, her voice tight, almost like she was talking to herself. Storm cracked it. I can't get maintenance to come out till Tuesday. I leaned my guitar case against the wall, walked closer. You're going to fall. I've got it. But the tape kept peeling off the damp glass, and the chair wobbled under her weight just enough to make me step forward without thinking. Let me, I said, hands already out. For a beat. She didn't move, just looked down at me like I'd said something too intimate without meaning to. Then she climbed down carefully, brushing her hands on her jeans, stepping aside. I taped the plastic while she held the bottom edge. Her hands were steady, but cold from the draft sneaking through. Up close, I noticed tiny cracks near her nails, like she worked with her hands more than she let on. There was a light scent of soap and coffee clinging to her clothes. Small things, ordinary, but somehow grounding. "You always work this late?" she asked, eyes still on the plastic. "Only when the gig's worth it," I said, smoothing the last corner. Tonight wasn't. That got the smallest laugh out of her, brief, unguarded, the kind that starts before a person remembers to hold it in. "Must be nice," she said after a moment. "What?" "To still decide what's worth your time." She said it like it slipped out, like a thought meant for no one. I looked at her then, really looked. She was tired. Not just from tonight. From years, maybe. There was a gravity in her shoulders. A quiet fight to keep moving forward in a world that didn't ask what she wanted anymore. "You okay?" I asked before I could stop myself. She blinked, like she'd forgotten I was standing there. "Yes," she said too quickly. Then softer, "I don't know." Silence swelled between us, filled with rain pattering against the taped window. She looked at me like she wanted to say something, but didn't, and that silence felt louder than words. Tension without resolution. It was raining again. Harder this time, the kind of rain that rattled against the windows like it wanted in. I'd just finished unloading equipment from the back of a friend's car, my shirt sticking to me, and the hallway outside my apartment felt like a sauna. Her door was cracked again, a thin slice of light spilling onto the dull carpet. I didn't knock. I just leaned against the frame. "You're going to ruin the hinges," I said, nodding toward the wedge of cardboard holding it open. She turned, startled for half a second, then relaxed. "Can't smell the paint otherwise. It's bad enough in here as it is." The air inside was thick with the tang of drying walls. A fresh coat, warm gray, calming, like she wanted the room to stop buzzing with its own loneliness. "You painted this yourself?" She gestured vaguely at the roller tray, at her old sweatshirt smeared with streaks like soft bruises. Felt like it needed to look less temporary. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor, a takeout container balanced on her knee. "Hungry?" she asked, almost without thinking. I sat opposite her, legs folding on instinct. We ate quietly, chopsticks clicking softly against cheap plastic. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't even planned. But it felt like something that wasn't supposed to exist between two neighbors at midnight. She told me about a project at work that wouldn't die, about a client who wanted changes that made no sense. I listened, really listened, not out of politeness, but because her voice got softer when she forgot to keep it guarded. At some point, the rain let up, but neither of us moved. "Sometimes I think," she said, pausing to stab a piece of cold broccoli, "that I built my life around not needing anyone, and now I'm not sure what to do with the quiet." I didn't know what to say. My chest felt tight in a way that had nothing to do with the humid air. We sat there, the hum of the refrigerator filling the room, her eyes fixed somewhere near the wall but not on it. A phone buzzed. Her phone. The screen lit up, face down on the table. A name she didn't flip over, just watched until it stopped. "You're not going to," I started. "No, quick," clipped. "Not tonight." And that was all she said. The air shifted after that. Not tense exactly, but awake, alert, like both of us suddenly aware of how close we were sitting, knees a breath apart, the smell of wet clothes and warm food weaving between us. I could see the faint smear of gray paint on her cheekbone. I wanted stupidly to brush it away. My hand was halfway to hers when she said, "You should go now." And I did. But only my body left that room. The shift neither can ignore. 2 days passed. We didn't cross paths. Not by accident, not on purpose. The hallway felt longer, emptier, like the building itself knew something was hanging in the air between two doors that used to mean nothing to each other. I tried not to think about her. I failed. On the third night, there was a knock. Not loud. Just enough to make me look up from the half-written chord chart on my lap. When I opened the door, she stood there. Hair damp from the mist outside, sweatshirt sleeves pushed up like she'd walked here before she could decide against it. "Hey," I said. She nodded, eyes flicking past me into my apartment like she was checking for something, or making sure no one else was there. "Can I sit?" she asked. I stepped aside. She sat at the small table by the window, arms folded loosely, shoulders curled forward like she was trying to take up less space. I sat opposite her. We didn't speak for a minute. The only sound was the faint creak of the radiator. Finally, she exhaled, long, measured. "This is weird, right?" I stared at her hands. "Yeah." Her laugh was small, humorless. "I keep telling myself it's just coincidence, that you're just a neighbor who happens to be kind. But it doesn't feel like coincidence anymore." I swallowed. My mouth felt dry. "It doesn't." Another silence. The kind that isn't empty, the kind that hums. "What are we doing?" she asked, quiet but direct, like the words had been waiting under her tongue for days. I opened my mouth, closed it, tried again. "I don't know." She rubbed her palms together slowly, like warming them. "You're young, Noah. You've said that before," I said gently. "I haven't," she corrected, eyes lifting to mine. "But I've thought it every time I looked at you." We sat there, two people who weren't supposed to be having this conversation, hearts pounding in a room that smelled like rain-soaked concrete and cheap coffee. "I don't want to hurt you," she said, voice low, almost breaking on the last word. "You haven't," I said. "You've just—" I stopped. She leaned slightly forward. "Just what?" "Made it hard to breathe," I said, before I could take it back. Her jaw tensed. She looked at me for a long time, like she was trying to see the end of something we hadn't even started. She didn't say anything, just looked at me, like she was already mourning something we never even had. It was late again. The rain had stopped, but the city still smelled wet, metallic, like everything had been rinsed but nothing was clean. I hadn't planned to see her. I was pacing my apartment, headphones on but no music playing, fingers restless over my guitar strings without pressing down. Then my phone buzzed. Not a call, a voicemail notification. Unknown number. I hit play. "Hi, this is Elena. I shouldn't have called. Sorry. Wrong number." Click. No message beyond that, but it wasn't wrong. It was her voice, unguarded, caught mid-breath, like she'd meant to say something and changed her mind halfway through. I stared at my phone for a long time. Then I went to her door. She opened after the second knock, hair pulled back messily, glasses on. I'd never seen her in glasses. They made her look less like the self-contained version of her I'd met in the hallway, more like someone caught in the middle of not knowing what to do with themselves. "I didn't mean to bother you," she said quietly. "You didn't," I said. "But you called." She closed her eyes briefly, leaning against the doorframe. "I was looking for a number," she said. "Yours was there. I don't even remember saving it. I just pressed it." We stood there in the hallway, no storm to hide behind, no excuse for being there except the fact that something in both of us had stopped waiting. "Do you want to come in?" she asked. Her place looked different. Not physically. Same books, same warm gray walls, but it felt different. There was a photo on the table, face down, edges frayed. She saw me glance at it. "You can look," she said, almost like a dare but soft. I turned it over. A man, her age maybe, younger by a few years, standing beside her on some cliffside. Both of them smiling like the world had decided to be kind that day. "He died," she said simply, no build-up, no tears. 6 years ago. Car accident. We were going to get married." My throat tightened, not from jealousy, not even from sadness, from the sheer weight of how much someone can hold quietly in the spaces you never see. "You remind me of him sometimes," she said, eyes low. "Not in looks, in how you listen." I didn't know what to say. I didn't reach for her. I just sat down at her kitchen table because standing felt impossible. She joined me. For a while, we didn't talk. Just sat there breathing in the same space, like maybe the air had to settle before words could return. She took a breath like she hadn't allowed herself to in years. And for the first time, she looked at me without fear. We stayed at the table until the clock nudged past 2 a.m. Neither of us had the energy to fill the air with anything that didn't matter. Her coffee went cold. My knee bounced under the table, not from nerves exactly. More like my body was trying to move forward while the rest of me knew better. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she said finally, eyes still on her mug. "Neither did I said. She gave a small, tired smile, the kind that knows something big has already shifted and there's no use pretending otherwise. "This isn't simple," she said. "It's not," I agreed. Another silence, but not the heavy kind this time. More like the quiet that follows after a song ends, when no one wants to break the echo. "I feel like I've been holding my breath for months," she said softly, turning the mug in slow circles. "Maybe years. And then you started knocking on doors, carrying boxes, asking questions you shouldn't, and suddenly I'm not sure what's safe anymore." I swallowed. My throat felt raw. "I don't want to make your life harder." She finally looked at me, really looked, and for a second, everything else fell away. "You haven't," she said. "You've made it feel like it could still matter. That's scarier than anything else." I reached across the table, slow enough for her to pull away. She didn't. Her fingers were warm, dry, still from all the restless gestures she'd been making a moment ago. We sat like that, just two hands on a cheap kitchen table in a quiet building that didn't care what we were doing. No kiss, no grand gesture, just the small weight of her thumb brushing against mine, like testing the shape of something fragile and real. "Are we doing this?" I asked finally, voice low, almost ashamed of how much I wanted her to say yes. "I don't know," she whispered, "but I'm tired of pretending I don't think about it." That was it. Not a promise, not a plan, just the truth. We stayed at the table until the street outside began to lighten. At some point, she leaned her forehead against my temple, eyes closed, breathing slow. Neither of us said a word. She didn't say she loved me, but she let her guard down, and that was louder than any "I love you" ever could be. Looking back now, it doesn't feel like a love story. Not in the way people expect when they hear one. It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't running through airports or dramatic confessions in the rain. It was a handful of quiet nights, 100 unsaid things, and the slow dismantling of two walls we both thought were permanent. Months have passed since that night at her table. We still live 2 doors apart, though it doesn't feel like 2 doors anymore. Some nights she falls asleep on my couch, glasses slipping down her nose, a book sliding toward the floor. Some mornings I leave for a gig before sunrise, careful not to wake her. A note under her coffee mug that just says, "Back later." We never talked about what to call it. We didn't need to. What changed wasn't about titles or promises. It was something in me, in how I stopped rushing through every moment like it didn't matter. And something in her, how she let her laughter come faster, unguarded, like she'd stopped asking herself if she deserved it. She still keeps his photo on the shelf. I don't ask her to move it. I think that's the point. Love doesn't replace what came before. It just grows next to it carefully, like plants leaning toward the same sun. Sometimes we still catch each other staring, like neither of us is entirely sure how we got here. Sometimes we pull apart, scared of how much weight a single touch suddenly carries. And sometimes, most times, we just sit quietly in the same room, breathing the same air, knowing we don't need to fill the space anymore. People talk about love like it's a decision you make once. For us, it's a choice we keep making, quietly, without ceremony. Every day we let the silence between us mean comfort instead of distance. I think that's what I learned. That love isn't always about what you say. It's what you don't run away from. And every now and then, when the hallway's quiet and the rain starts up again, she'll lean against my doorway, arms folded, and say almost the same thing she did that first night, in that same quiet tone that turns my stomach upside down. Don't pretend you don't want this. And I don't. Not anymore. What would you have done? Walked away or knocked on her door?